Belgium is very, very, very complicated. So there's a German community that runs a bit of German Belgium. I'm quite rooted in the Flemish side because my children went to Dutch language school. Mm-hmm. Then I've got friends who are quite rooted in the French side. I said to you, we've also got the Catholic Church, which runs a lot of schools. So Flemish schools might be Catholic or state, and also Flemish. Okay. And French language schools might be Catholic or state, and also French language. Okay. And then we've got a big international population because we've got the Commission, the Parliament, we've got NATO, we've got all the little, I say little bodies, some quite large bodies that are around NATO and the Parliament, things like that. So a lot of lobbying bodies. So it's quite a diverse population in Belgium.
Yeah. And can you say a little bit about the organisation that you work for there?
Okay, well, so there's two. The original one is ADHD, ASC and LD Belgium. So it's ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, dysgraphia, any of the other DISs, as we call them. We touch on Tourette's, but there's a Tourette's organisation that I know about, and a lady who's very good with Tourette's, so I'd put people onto her instead. We started out because the lady who founded it, Joanne Norris, was a teacher, and she came to Brussels and she discovered that there wasn't really anything for the population that speak mostly English. And when I say mostly English, we might have German speakers and Spanish speakers and Swedish and all sorts of people. But we use English as the main language. My daughter's got ADHD. What I've noticed is autism is more talked about. You know, autism, there are a number of local groups that cater for autistic people and their families. So small groups in towns where, you know, just somewhere where you can go and have a cup of coffee and have a chat to somebody and get some information. It's in Dutch or it's in French, but there are a number of those little organisations. There are a number of organisations that take older children, teenage, you know, so school leavers, if they're not going into a job, there are organisations who take them, encourage them to volunteer, give them some training, do that sort of thing with them. That's all quite set up in the different communities. And as I say, some of them can be very, very local. So like that, there's quite a lot of support for autistic people. Dyslexia and ADHD and things, less well known. I mean, again, my daughter volunteered through one of these organisations for a while. They didn't mind that she wasn't autistic. They saw that she needed to volunteer, that she had a need. They were quite open, you know, and welcoming. So I think if you speak the language of the country, it's quite easy to find something. As I say, I know that if the French speaking side less well, but I think there's still stuff there. Our people have the problem of language. So the people who are not Belgian generally often are only living here temporarily. And our population, as it were, we might have somebody come in, say a family who have been in America, they may be American. They've been in America, they've got a diagnosis for one or more of their children. They come here and they say, in America, we had this, this and this. Can we get the same medicine? Can we get the same therapy?
Yeah.
How does it work here?
Yeah.
I have a family at the moment who have come from Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
They're Spanish speaking, and they have an autistic son
Mm-hmm.
who in their country was in mainstream school
Mm-hmm.
and was accommodated there very nicely.
Mm-hmm.
In Belgium, he's in special school.
Okay.
Because the Belgian government, both sides, the Flemish side and the French-speaking side, have decided that it's better to take children out of mainstream school and put them into special school. There are advantages and disadvantages.
Mm-hmm.
The advantage is the class size. You tend to have classes of 8.
Yeah.
8 pupils, 1 teacher, great.
Yeah.
The disadvantage, of course, is that the children are segregated. But they can have, if they're capable of an academic education and to go to university, they can have just the same sort of academic education as they would do in a regular school. Yeah.
But what sort of awareness does this breed amongst the other children? Do the other children then have an awareness of what, let's say, neurodiversity is, or do they see neurodiversity as I don't know, as something alien almost, as something that needs segregating?
Because children are normally taken out and put into special school, the teachers in the mainstream schools don't have very much awareness. So I'm saying the teachers rather than the children.
Yeah.
The children I don't know as much about because I've never been in a classroom and seen how much awareness they have.
Yeah.
And even then, my own daughter, I've got 2 daughters. One of them has inattentive ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
Her school knew nothing about that, didn't recognise it at all. But we met a friend who also had, well, more sort of combined ADHD, that girl.
Yeah.
And that's her school was saying to her mother after about 2 months, "Oh, we think your daughter's got ADHD. Can you go and get her tested?" And the mother was going, "Oh no, don't be daft." But after another couple of months, the mother said, "Yes, okay, I'll get her tested." And that was a very happy story because she didn't think her child was terribly academic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When she had her tested, she realised that the girl was a lot more academic than she thought. And she was capable of studying to go to university.
Okay, so what had made them think she wasn't academic before the testing?
She didn't think she was academic. There are different levels of school here.
Right.
So there's academic schools where you train to go to university, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's technical schools where you're training to do engineering, possibly not nursing, I wouldn't think, but you know, I can't think, and electrical, plumbing, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then there are more blue collar schools, you know, where it's hairdressing and what have you.
Yeah, very much like the Germans.
So there's different levels, but you can move between the different levels of education quite easily.
Okay.
You might have to do an extra year.
Yeah. I mean, if you're being taught in one of the lower schools, does the education move in different directions in these schools? So if you're in, let's say, the blue collar school for 3 years, aren't you learning different things at a different speed from the other schools?
Okay. What I have read, so this is academic knowledge, not practical, because I've never met anyone who did it. But from what I've read, you can go 6 years, your entire 6 years secondary school education in a blue collar school. You take an extra year at the end, you can go to university. Because the point is, anybody can go to university here. At the end of the first year of university, you have extremely tough exams, and about half the students don't pass.
Right.
But you have the ability to get there It's just that you've got to pass the first, well, you've got to pass all of it, but
Yeah.
if you don't pass the first year, then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in general, the Belgian education system, would you say that because of what you might call the streaming system, they put less pressure academically on kids and say it's okay not to be academic? Or is it that there's the same academic pressure to get to university and some kids are held back? I mean, what's the balance there?
Oh, okay. My experience is with the academics system, because both my children were in an academic school, and the pressure is very, very, very tough.
Ah, right.
Very tough. Okay. It's a baccalaureate system like France.
Yeah.
So you have to take all the subjects. You can't drop any.
So the Belgian education system in general, or at least in the Flemish area where you are, you'd say is it traditional? Is it progressive? Is it a bit what you might call Victorian? Is it 21st century? How would you describe it in that respect?
I would say it's quite old-fashioned and traditional.
Okay.
My girls used to have workbooks in the secondary school, and they'd take them through a lesson, and you'd have a bit of writing, and then you'd have 3 or 4 lines that they could fill in.
Yeah.
And it was very much that, here are 3 or 4 lines where you write your bit.
Ah,
so it's very formal.
Yeah.
Very formal education.
It's about working memory rather than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, one daughter's done a degree already in Ireland, and she found that a big difference, because she did an arts degree, she did a BA in sociology and Asian studies, and she was being asked to write and give her opinions. And the Belgian education system doesn't have students giving opinions as much as students saying what opinions they've been given, if you understand what I mean.
There's that memory thing, there's that sort of recollection, read, learn, inwardly digest, and then regurgitate. Yeah. Therefore, what kind of space is there for those with neurodiversity to fit into this system? Do they all have to effectively, do you find that many people who are neurodiverse go into sort of special schools? Or is it that people with dyslexia, for instance, or ADHD might simply fail?
Okay. So the second part of the organisation, I've started now a neurodiverse adults group.
Right.
So I've met some neurodiverse adults, and that's really interesting. We had a young lady who came to one session and she didn't come back, but she had gone through the special school system. There was nothing about this young woman who is now working that would lead you to think that she'd been educated in a special school.
Okay.
Yeah, so, people do sometimes choose it. I know somebody who has a boy who's dyslexic. He was put into a special school. She thought it was brilliant. She thought the level of his education was fantastic. She was really happy about it.
Does it cost money? Because in Britain, most boarding schools are quite expensive.
No.
Right.
No. But again, you've got a throwback here. So ages ago, I talked to a woman who was in a Catholic boarding school. Now, she was about 16 several years ago. So, this is a while ago. But she was in a Catholic boarding school because her parents had a business. And the Catholic Church basically said to her parents, you've got a shop to run. You don't need to be looking after the kids as well. We'll take them Monday to Friday. We'll have them sleep at school. We'll feed them and everything. We'll give them back to you at the weekend.
Okay.
And basically they were doing some childcare.
So it's almost like there's a normalization of how you separate people in a special school as well. So you talk about special schools for neurodiversity, but that's not abnormal. It's not that there's sort of a social stigma attached with that.
Not as much. I mean, as I said, some of our parents, so we have a few parents where they've got children in special schools.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them aren't happy about it because in my they are saying, in my country, this wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
And of course, if they've got to explain to the family back home, oh, Guido, for want of a better name, Guido is in a special school, the family back home are going, what? That's terrible. You can't do that. Yeah. So, there's those sort of attitudes. But no, I mean, generally, the level of education is good. And you have possibly know one of the king's sons is in a special school.
I didn't know he was in a special school. No.
He's dyslexic.
Yeah,
he's in a school called Eureka.
But I didn't know he was in a special school. Right.
He's in a school called Eureka, which is in Leuven, where I live. What you should do at some point is find out more about Eureka, this school where the king's son is, because I've just remembered I was talking to somebody who is interested in dyslexia. Months ago, 18 months ago or something. She'd been to Eureka for a morning to visit it, and she was so impressed. The children there had got words in English, French and Dutch, and they were making sentences out of them. So, they were putting the words in the right order, but she said they were doing it in 3 languages at the same time.
Oh, wow.
That is impressive. Yeah. She was impressed, and she was somebody whose adult children were dyslexic, so she'd had a lot of, she knew a lot about dyslexia.
Yeah, and there's this, it sounds like there's almost a burgeoning of these specialist schools in Belgium, that you can do this in Belgium using one of these specialist schools. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've got to think that if the king's son is there, they have got as much money, they could get him a private one-to-one tutor if they wanted.
Yeah.
So you've got to think that if they're making the choice to send him somewhere like that, it's got to be worth it.
Yeah. I mean, they're not just going to, they're not just going to ruin their own child's education for the sake of egalitarianism. They're going to choose what's right for the sake of what's right.
Yeah, I don't think that egalitarian.
What, a monarchy?
No,
not egalitarian.
I think he quite likes being king.
I know. So working with neurodiverse people as you do, would you say that in general there's a kind of an acceptance of neurodiversity in Belgium, even though the culture is so multicultural?
I absolutely think it depends on where you are and who you're talking to. There's a young lady that's been coming to some of our meetings, and she works for a public organisation. I don't want to say which one, but she's worked in more than one department. In one department, she wasn't really very happy, and she wasn't really treated very well, and she wasn't given much allowance for her neurodiversity, her needs, which might be, a quiet place and things like that. In another department, she found that her immediate manager was very happy to meet her halfway and to help her and to give her any quiet space, wear headphones if you want, whatever. But a colleague wasn't happy until they had a chat about it. When this young woman started, she was asked to do something and she wasn't quite sure how to do it. So she didn't do it. And then, of course, there was an argument the next day because she didn't do the task. and they had to have a talk about it, and then they came to an arrangement between themselves that if there was something she didn't know how to do, she'd ask about it quicker.
But this isn't a public body, and it sounds that the arrangements that are being
So
made
yes,
are
it depends.
quite ad hoc within this public body. So you come across a problem, and if you're lucky enough to have a manager who understands, then you'll sort the problem out. It's not that there are structures in place in these public bodies.
I think there are supposed to be, I think there are formal structures.
Okay.
It's just whether or not the formal structures are followed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know somebody else who was in a private firm, and she was having problems, and they found her a coach, not a special neurodiverse coach, just a coach, who was actually quite good. And but they felt their entire responsibility was to find her a coach. After they'd found her a coach, she had to make all the changes because they'd found her a coach.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So the coach helped this woman make the decision that it was probably better to look for another job.
Yeah, we'll pass on the responsibility to her, so that yeah. And I'm interested in what room there is for neurodiversity within these structures. That's sort of organic, if you like, rather than someone said we need neurodiversity, we need, ethnic diversity, we need gender diversity, or whatever. I don't know what sort of organic space there is for neurodiversity.
I think, okay, I know the UK Parliament now has a little group that meets that looks at ADHD, because I know somebody who's on that group, who's not an MP. I could imagine there was one for autism. I might imagine there was one for the DISs, right? Okay. Similar sort of things. If you gave me a bit of time, I could name 12 or whatever MEPs who are interested in neurodiversity. So there's a guy called Tomash who usually comes to meetings. A couple of the Irish MEPs, but they may have retired at the last election. And I can more or less tell you which ones they are. There was a Maltese MEP, but he didn't win at the last election either. But there are certain people who have a real interest in neurodiversity. So the groups that are here who are talking about neurodiversity, so there's the European Federation of Neurological Associations, EFNA, there's GAMIAN, can't remember what that stands for offhand, and they will organise meetings in Parliament. When I say Parliament, in committee rooms, they'll have 2 or 3 MEPs there. They'll invite people from various different organisations. So we used to go. Now it's all on Zoom. There is interest there. And there are people there. There's an economic and social committee who I find very interesting, and they look at society more in general, and they're quite interested in the idea of neurodiverse employees as a boost to business. That they are starting to buy into that. And there are 1 or 2 people on that committee who've met somebody neurodiverse themselves and worked with them and discovered that this can be a real advantage in a business field. So, the idea is moving in. I mean, we've also got people who, and organisations who talk about mental health a lot. With the pandemic, I think we're going to move from looking at purely physical to more mental health as well.